I stood outside that glass building in the pouring rain, holding a yellow lunchbox. Inside was my son, a big-shot chef in New York City. I just wanted to bring him a taste of home. I didn't know he'd look at my muddy boots and see a stain on his perfect life. I didn't know he'd lock me in a closet. And I definitely didn't know that I'd be the one to save him. This is my story. My name is Clara. I'm 65 years old now, and I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who tells stories on the internet. But some things, well, they sit heavy on your chest until you let them out. I'm from a small town in Alabama. The kind of place where everybody knows your name, where you leave your front door unlocked, and where Sunday dinners smell like cornbread and collard greens from 3 blocks away. I raised my son Julian there. Just me and him, after his daddy passed when Julian was only 7. I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at the diner at night. My hands were always rough, my back always ached, but I never let Julian see me cry. I wanted him to dream big. I wanted him to leave that small town and become something. And he did. Julian got a scholarship to culinary school in New York City. He called me every Sunday at first. Then it became every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then silence. 3 years. 3 years without seeing my boy's face. But I told myself it was okay. He was busy. He was building his life. He was working at some fancy French restaurant called Le Petit Pierre. I didn't even know how to pronounce it right, but I was proud. So proud my chest hurt. I wanted to see him. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him I missed him. So I did something maybe a little foolish. I packed my old yellow lunchbox, the same one I used to pack his school lunches in, and I made his favorite stew. Beef, potatoes, carrots, and my secret ingredient, hickory salt from my grandmother's recipe. I took a 2-day bus ride from Alabama to New York. My knees ached. My back screamed. But I didn't care. I just wanted to surprise my son with a taste of home. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious how far this story travels. The bus pulled into the Port Authority station just after 8 p.m. It was raining. Not a soft southern rain, this was harsh, cold, angry rain that soaked through my coat in seconds. I stood on that sidewalk, holding my yellow lunchbox close to my chest, staring up at the tallest buildings I'd ever seen in my life. They looked like they were trying to touch heaven, but all I felt was small. New York didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a place that swallowed people whole. I asked 3 different strangers for directions before someone finally pointed me toward the restaurant. When I got there, I just stood outside for a minute, looking through the tall glass windows. Inside, everything glowed. Crystal chandeliers. White tablecloths. People in expensive clothes laughing and drinking wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. And somewhere in there, my Julian was cooking. I felt something twist in my stomach. Not excitement. Not pride. Fear. I didn't belong here. I knew that. My boots were old and muddy. My coat was fraying at the sleeves. My hair was wet and flat against my head. But I came all this way. I wasn't going to turn back now. I pushed open the door and asked the hostess, a tall, beautiful girl with perfect makeup, if I could see Julian. She looked me up and down like I'd tracked dirt into a church. Chef Julian is very busy, she said, her smile tight and fake. Do you have an appointment? I'm his mother, I said softly. Her smile disappeared completely. She didn't say anything. She just turned and walked toward the back. I followed her through a hallway that smelled like butter and wine, and then she pushed open 2 swinging doors. The kitchen. It hit me like a wave. The heat. The noise. The shouting. Pots clanging. Flames roaring. Men in white coats moving fast, like soldiers in a war. And there he was. Julian. He was yelling at someone. His face was red. His hair was slicked back. He looked older. Tired. Angry. And then he turned around. Our eyes met. I smiled. I couldn't help it. I hadn't seen my boy in 3 years. But he didn't smile back. He didn't smile. He didn't run to hug me. Instead, his face went pale. And I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Shame. The kitchen went quiet. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Julian didn't move at first. He just stood there, staring at me like I was a ghost. Or worse, like I was a problem he didn't know how to fix. Then he snapped out of it. He rushed toward me, but not the way a son rushes to his mother. He grabbed my arm, not rough, but firm, and pulled me to the side, away from the other chefs. "Mom," he hissed under his breath. "What are you doing here?" I held up the yellow lunchbox. My hands were shaking a little, but I kept my voice steady. "I brought you something," I said. "Your favorite." I thought maybe we could sit down for a few minutes and... "You can't be here right now," he cut me off. His eyes darted around the kitchen. "Look at you. You're soaking wet. Your boots," he glanced down at my feet. "You're tracking mud on my floor." I looked down. There were small wet footprints behind me. My old brown boots, caked with rainwater and street grime, had left marks on his perfect white tiles. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't mean to." "It's not just that." Julian's voice dropped even lower. He leaned in close, and I could smell the stress on him, sweat and garlic and something sharp. "Mr. Sterling is coming tonight. The food critic. If I get a good review from him, I keep my position. If I don't..." He shook his head. "I can't have distractions. I can't have you here. Not like this. Not like this." Those 3 words hit me harder than any slap ever could. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him that I didn't care about his fancy kitchen or his critic or his perfect white tiles. I wanted to tell him that I was his mother, and I rode 2 days on a bus just to see him. But I didn't say any of that. Because when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see my little boy anymore. I saw a stranger. A man who was terrified of being embarrassed. "Where do you want me to go?" I asked. He looked around frantically. Then he grabbed my arm again and pulled me toward a small door at the back of the kitchen. A storage closet. He opened it. It was dark inside. I could see shelves stacked with cans and bags of flour. Just wait in here for a little while," he said. "Please, Mom. I'll come get you when service is over. We can talk then. I promise." I stood there, holding my lunchbox, staring into that dark little room. And then I stepped inside. Julian closed the door behind me. I heard the latch click. I sat down on a sack of flour in the dark. My knees hurt. My heart hurt worse. I could hear him through the door. Shouting. Panicking. Moving fast. And I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. My son was ashamed of me. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 30. Time moves strange when you're alone with your thoughts. There was a thin crack of light coming through the bottom of the door. I could hear everything. The clang of pots. The hiss of something frying. Julian's voice rising above it all, sharp and frantic. "Faster. Faster. He's going to be here any minute." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. The air in that closet smelled like onions and old cardboard. My back pressed against a metal shelf. My yellow lunchbox sat in my lap, still warm. I thought about the day Julian left for New York. He was 19. Skinny. Excited. His eyes were so bright that morning, like he'd swallowed the sun. I drove him to the bus station in my old pickup truck. He hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "I'm gonna make you proud, Mama," he whispered into my shoulder. "I'm gonna make something of myself. I promise." And I believed him. I always believed him. But somewhere along the way, between Alabama and New York, between my boy and Chef Julian, something changed. He stopped calling. He stopped writing. And when I finally saw him again, standing in that bright, loud kitchen, he didn't see his mother. He saw a liability. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in a closet surrounded by canned tomatoes and flour sacks. Then I heard it. A crash. Something metal hitting the floor. Then Julian's voice, louder than before, cracking with panic. "No, no, no. Not now." I pressed my ear to the door. "The duck is ruined," Julian shouted. "It's dry. Mr. Sterling is going to walk in here in 5 minutes and we have nothing." Another voice, calmer, older, "Chef, we can refire it." "There's no time." Julian's voice broke. "We're done. We're done." I heard footsteps. Fast. Then the sound of a heavy door slamming. Silence. The kitchen had gone quiet again. I could hear murmurs. Whispers. Someone said, "He's in the freezer." My chest tightened. Julian used to do that when he was little. When something went wrong, when he failed a test, when the other kids made fun of him, he'd lock himself in his room and cry where no one could see him. He was doing it again. Hiding. Breaking. And I was sitting in a closet. I stood up. My knees popped. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. I looked down at my yellow lunchbox. And I made a choice. Maybe he was ashamed of me. Maybe I didn't belong in his perfect kitchen. But I was still his mother. And I wasn't going to let my boy fail. I opened the closet door slowly. Just a crack at first. The kitchen was still chaotic, but different now. The chefs were moving slower. Their faces looked pale. Worried. One of them was scraping a burned duck into the trash. Another was staring at the clock on the wall. No one noticed me. I stepped out into the light. My boots squeaked on the tile. I kept my head down and moved toward the counter where Julian had tossed my lunchbox earlier. It was still there. Sitting between a stack of dirty plates and a container of cream. I picked it up. Held it against my chest for a second. Then I opened it. The steam rose up, soft and golden. The stew was still warm. I could smell the beef, the potatoes, the carrots, and that hint of hickory salt, my grandmother's secret, passed down to me, and then to Julian when he was young enough to stand on a stool and stir the pot. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have a French name. There was no foam, no gold leaf, no tiny vegetables arranged like art. It was just food. But it was made with love. I looked around the kitchen. There was a beautiful ceramic bowl on the counter, white, with a gold rim. The kind of bowl you'd serve something expensive in. I poured the stew into it. Slowly. Carefully. I wiped the rim with a clean cloth, the way I'd seen them do on cooking shows. I even added a small sprig of parsley from a container nearby. Then I reached up and rang the service bell. Ding. The sound cut through the noise like a church bell on Sunday morning. Every head in the kitchen turned toward me. A young chef, maybe 25, stepped forward. He looked confused. "Who are you?" "I'm Julian's mother," I said quietly. "And this needs to go out." He stared at the bowl. Then at me. Then back at the bowl. "But Chef didn't." "I know," I said. "But it's ready. And Mr. Sterling is waiting." The young chef hesitated. Then he looked at the clock. Looked at the bowl. And picked it up. He carried it through the swinging doors into the dining room. I stood there, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The kitchen was silent now. All eyes on me. Some of the chefs looked angry. Others looked confused. And then the freezer door opened. Julian stepped out. His eyes were red. His face was pale. He looked like a man who'd just lost everything. And then he saw me. Standing in the middle of his kitchen. Holding my empty yellow lunchbox. "Mom." His voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" Before I could answer, the swinging doors burst open. The young chef came back in. His face was flushed. His eyes were wide. "Chef," he said breathlessly. "Mr. Sterling. He wants to meet the chef who made that dish," he said. The young man paused, like he couldn't believe his own words. He said it's the best thing he's eaten in 10 years. The kitchen exploded. Chefs started clapping. Someone whooped. Another person laughed in disbelief. But Julian just stood there, frozen, staring at me. I smiled. A small, tired smile. "It's the same stew I used to make on Sundays," I said softly. "You always loved it." Julian's mouth opened. Then closed. His hands were shaking. For a moment, I thought he might yell at me. Tell me I had no right. But instead, something in his face cracked. And my strong, successful, big-shot chef son started to cry. Julian didn't cry loud. He wasn't that kind of man anymore. But I saw his shoulders shake. I saw him cover his face with both hands. I saw him turn away from his staff, like he was ashamed to let them see. But I saw. One of the older chefs, a man with gray in his beard, stepped forward and put a hand on Julian's shoulder. "Go," he said quietly. "We'll handle the rest of service. Go." Julian nodded. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, took a shaky breath, and walked toward me. He didn't say anything. He just took my arm, gentle this time, and led me out of the kitchen, through a back hallway, and into a small office. It was cramped. There was a desk covered in papers, a folding chair, and a bulletin board pinned with orders and invoices. It smelled like coffee and stress. Julian closed the door behind us. And for a long moment, we just stood there. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't mean to." "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't apologize." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were red and wet. "I put you in a closet, Mama." His voice broke on the word Mama. He hadn't called me that in years. "I looked at you like you were. Like you were something to be ashamed of. And you saved me anyway." I reached out and touched his cheek. He flinched, like he didn't deserve it. "You're my son," I said simply. "That's what mothers do." "But he shook his head, angry at himself. "I've been so focused on being somebody. On proving I made it. I stopped calling. I stopped visiting. I told myself I was too busy, but the truth is..." He swallowed hard. "The truth is I was embarrassed. Of where I came from. Of my accent. Of you. That should have hurt. And maybe part of it did. But I'd already known. I'd felt it the second he looked at my muddy boots." "Julian," I said, "I didn't come here to make you feel guilty. I came because I missed you. That's all." "I don't deserve that," he whispered. "Maybe not," I said, and I saw him flinch. "But love isn't about deserving. It's about showing up. Even when it's hard. Even when the person you love has forgotten how to love you back." He stared at me. And then, slowly, he sank into the folding chair and put his head in his hands. "I forgot everything you taught me," he said quietly. I thought success meant leaving everything behind. I thought being a chef meant fancy plates and French names and impressing people who don't even know my story." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "But that stew. Mama," That stew had more heart in it than anything I've cooked in 3 years. I knelt down in front of him, even though my knees screamed in protest. I took his hands in mine. "You didn't forget," I said. "You just got lost for a little while. But you can always come home, baby. You can always come back." He squeezed my hands so tight it hurt. And then he pulled me into a hug, a real one, the kind he used to give me when he was small and scared and needed his mama. We stayed like that for a long time. When we finally pulled apart, Julian wiped his face and laughed, a wet, shaky laugh. "Mr. Sterling wants to meet you," he said. "He thinks you're some secret guest chef I've been hiding." I smiled. "What are you going to tell him?" Julian looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw my boy again. "I'm going to tell him the truth." Julian stood up and straightened his chef's coat. He wiped his eyes one last time, took a deep breath, and opened the office door. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. I hesitated. "Julian, I'm not dressed for." "I don't care," he said firmly. "Please, Mama. Come with me." So I took his hand. And we walked back through the kitchen together. The staff stopped what they were doing. Some of them smiled. Others nodded respectfully. The young chef who'd carried out my stew gave me a small thumbs up. Julian pushed through the swinging doors, and suddenly we were in the dining room. It was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. Soft lighting. Quiet music. People in suits and dresses eating off plates that looked like tiny works of art. And there, at a corner table, sat a man in his 60s. Silver hair. Expensive glasses. A notebook open in front of him. "Mr. Sterling." He looked up when he saw us approaching. His eyes moved from Julian to me. He took in my wet coat, my old boots, my simple dress. And then he smiled. "Chef Julian," he said, standing up. "I was hoping to meet the genius behind that dish." Julian's grip on my hand tightened. "Mr. Sterling, this is my mother. Clara. She made the stew." Mr. Sterling's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Then his smile grew wider. He extended his hand to me. "Mrs. Clara," he said warmly. "That was the most honest, soulful dish I've had in a decade. Where did you train?" I shook his hand, feeling the roughness of my palm against his smooth one. "I didn't train anywhere, sir," I said. I cooked for my son. That's all I've ever done." Mr. Sterling looked at Julian. Then back at me. Then he laughed, a genuine, warm laugh. "Do you know what's wrong with most restaurants today?" he said. "They forget that food is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to connect people. It's supposed to feel like home." He gestured to the empty bowl on his table. "That stew. That wasn't just food. That was love on a plate." Julian's eyes were shining again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. "She took a 2-day bus ride to bring it to me," Julian said quietly. "And I almost threw it away." Mr. Sterling's expression softened. He looked at me with something like respect. "Then you're a lucky man, chef," he said. "Not everyone gets a second chance to appreciate what really matters." He picked up his notebook and scribbled something down. Then he closed it and looked at Julian. "You'll get your star," he said. "Not because of the fancy plates or the technique. But because tonight, for the first time, I tasted something real in this restaurant. Don't lose that." Julian nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Mr. Sterling tipped his head to me. "It was an honor, Mrs. Clara." And then he walked out. Julian and I stood there in the middle of that fancy dining room. People were staring at us. Whispering. Probably wondering who the old woman in the muddy boots was. But Julian didn't care. He turned to me, and his voice was steady now. Strong. "I need to tell you something, Mama." I looked up at him. "What is it, baby?" "I'm coming home." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Julian looked around the dining room, at the crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the people in their expensive clothes. Then he looked back at me. "Not forever," he said. "But I need to come home for a while. I need to remember who I was before all this. Before I started caring more about stars than people." My heart swelled, but I kept my voice steady. "Julian, you worked so hard to get here. You can't just—" "I'm not giving it up," he said. "I'm just taking a step back." Mr. Sterling was right. I lost something along the way. And I think it's still sitting on your kitchen table back in Alabama. I didn't understand at first. Then I saw the look in his eyes. "You want to learn the recipes again," I said softly. He nodded. "Not just the recipes, Mama. I want to remember why I started cooking in the first place." His voice dropped. "Do you remember? When I was 10, and you were working double shifts." I did remember. How could I forget? Julian had started cooking out of necessity. I'd be gone from sunrise to midnight some days, and he'd get hungry. So he'd pull out my old recipe cards, the ones my mama gave me, and her mama gave her, and he'd try to make something. Most of the time, it was a mess. Burned rice. Rubbery chicken. Once, he nearly set the kitchen on fire trying to make biscuits. But he kept trying. And somewhere along the way, cooking stopped being a chore for him. It became something else. Something that made his eyes light up. "You used to call me at the diner," I said, smiling at the memory. "You'd tell me every single step. Mama, I added the salt. Mama, I stirred it 3 times. Mama, it smells good." Julian laughed, and it sounded lighter than it had in years. "And you'd stay on the phone with me the whole time. Even when you were busy. Even when your boss was glaring at you. Because you were my baby," I said simply. "And you needed me." "I still need you," Julian said, his voice breaking just a little. "I just forgot how to ask." I reached up and cupped his face in both hands. He was so much taller than me now, but in that moment, he looked like my little boy again. "You don't have to ask," I said. "You just have to show up." He closed his eyes and leaned into my touch. "I'll talk to the owner," he said after a moment. "I'll take a leave. 2 months. Maybe 3. I'll come back to Alabama, and you can teach me everything again. The right way. Your way." "And then what?" I asked. He opened his eyes. "Then I come back here. But I bring you with me. Not hidden in a closet. Not ashamed." His jaw tightened with determination. "I want you in my kitchen, Mama. I want your recipes on my menu. I want people to know that everything I learned from you." Tears blurred my vision. I tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway. "You don't have to do that for me, baby." "I'm not doing it for you," Julian said. "I'm doing it for me. Because I don't want to be the kind of man who hides his mama in a closet. I want to be the kind of man who's proud of where he came from." We stood there for a moment, just holding each other, while the fancy restaurant buzzed around us. And I realized something. This whole time, I thought I came to New York to bring my son a piece of home. But really, I came to remind him that home was still waiting. And it always would be. Julian walked me back to the kitchen. The dinner service was winding down now. The chefs were cleaning their stations, scrubbing pots, wiping down counters. The frantic energy from earlier had melted into something quieter. Tired, but satisfied. When we walked in, a few of them looked up. One of them, the older chef with the gray beard, nodded at Julian. "We finished strong, chef," he said. Sterling left happy. "I know," Julian said. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus looked at me and smiled. "Your stew saved us tonight, ma'am." I felt my cheeks warm. It was nothing fancy. "That's what made it perfect," Marcus said. Then he went back to scrubbing his station. Julian led me to a small table in the corner of the kitchen, the kind of table where the staff sits during breaks. He pulled out a chair for me, and I sat down, grateful to finally rest my aching knees. He disappeared for a moment, then came back with 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and a bottle of water. "I saved some," he said, setting a bowl in front of me. "I hope you don't mind." I looked down. It was my stew. Still warm. He'd plated it simply this time, no fancy bowl, no garnish. Just food. He sat across from me, and we ate together in silence for a while. It tasted like home. Like Sunday afternoons and front porch swings and the sound of cicadas in the summer. It tasted like every hard year, every sacrifice, every moment I spent trying to give my boy a better life. Julian ate slowly. He closed his eyes with each bite, like he was trying to memorize it. "I forgot how good this was," he said quietly. "You used to eat 3 bowls," I said, smiling. "I could barely make enough." I was a growing boy. He looked up at me. "You know what the crazy thing is? I've spent 3 years cooking French food. Duck confit. Coq au vin. Bouillabaisse. I learned every technique. Every sauce. Every classic dish." He paused. "But I never once made this. I told myself it was too simple. That it wasn't sophisticated enough." "And now?" I asked. He stared down at his bowl. "Now I realize I was an idiot." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You weren't an idiot, baby. You were just trying to prove something." "To who?" he asked. "To Mr. Sterling? To the other chefs? He stopped. "To you?" I shook my head. "I was already proud of you, Julian. I was proud the day you left. I was proud every time I told someone my son was a chef in New York City. I didn't need you to be fancy. I just needed you to be happy." His eyes filled with tears again. He wiped them quickly, but I saw. "I wasn't happy," he admitted. "I was stressed. I was angry all the time. I yelled at my staff. I barely slept. I kept thinking if I just worked harder, if I just got that star, then I'd feel like I made it." He shook his head. "But tonight, when I thought I'd lost everything, the only thing I wanted was to call you. And I realized I hadn't called you in 6 months." 7, I said softly. He flinched. 7 months. "But you're calling now," I said. "That's what matters." Julian set down his spoon. He looked at me with something like wonder. "How do you do that?" he asked. "Do what?" "Forgive me. Just like that. I treated you terribly tonight. I put you in a closet, Mama. And you're sitting here acting like it never happened." I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, "Because holding on to anger would only hurt me, baby. Not you. You already feel bad enough. I don't need to make it worse." I smiled. "Besides, you're my son. I'm not going to stop loving you because you made a mistake. That's not how love works." Julian stared at me. Then he laughed, a sad, broken kind of laugh. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," I said, and he looked startled. Then I smiled. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed again, and this time it sounded a little lighter. We finished our stew in comfortable silence. And when Julian finally stood up to take the bowls to the sink, he stopped and looked at me. "Mama," he said. "When I come home, will you teach me how to make your biscuits again? The real way?" I smiled. "The real way takes time, baby. And patience." He nodded. "I know. That's why I need to learn." And right then, I knew. My boy wasn't lost anymore. He was finding his way back. Julian insisted on walking me to a hotel that night. "A nice one," he said. His treat. I tried to argue. I'd already booked a cheap motel near the bus station, but he wouldn't hear it. He called a car, helped me into the back seat, and rode with me through the rain-soaked streets of New York. We didn't talk much during the drive. He just held my hand. Every now and then, he'd squeeze it, like he was making sure I was really there. The hotel was beautiful. Too beautiful for someone like me. Marble floors, a chandelier in the lobby, a doorman who tipped his hat. Julian checked me in and walked me to my room. It was on the 8th floor, with a view of the city lights twinkling through the rain. "You didn't have to do all this," I said, setting my yellow lunchbox on the bed. "Yes, I did," Julian said. He stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, looking younger than he had in years. "Mama, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "When you were sitting in that closet tonight." He paused, struggling with the words. "What were you thinking?" I sat down on the edge of the bed. I thought about lying. Thought about telling him it was fine, that I understood. But I'd never lied to my son before. I wasn't about to start now. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "that I didn't recognize you anymore." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I was thinking," I continued, "that somewhere between the boy who called me every Sunday and the man who shoved me in a closet, I lost my son. And I didn't know how to get him back." Julian's face crumpled. He sank down onto the chair by the window and put his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I know you are," I said. "But Julian, I need you to understand something. I didn't come here to punish you. I didn't come here to make you feel guilty. I came because I missed you. That's it. That's all." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "How do I fix this?" "You already started," I said. "You told the truth. You chose me over your pride. That's more than most people ever do." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When I was a kid, and you were working all those jobs, I used to hear you crying sometimes. Late at night, when you thought I was asleep." I hadn't known he'd heard that. "I'd lie in bed," he continued, "and I'd promise myself that one day, I'd make enough money so you'd never have to cry again. I'd buy you a house. I'd take care of you. I'd make everything better." He shook his head. "And then I got here, and I got so caught up in surviving, in proving myself, that I forgot why I was doing it in the first place." "Oh, baby," I said softly. "I never needed a house. I never needed money. I just needed my son to call me once in a while. That's all I ever wanted." "I know that now," he said. "But I didn't know it then. I thought if I could just be successful enough, then I'd be worthy of everything you sacrificed for me." I stood up and walked over to him. I knelt down in front of his chair, my knees screaming in protest, and I took his face in my hands. "Julian," I said firmly, "you were worthy the day you were born. You didn't have to earn my love. You didn't have to prove anything. You were my son. That was enough." He broke then. Really broke. He wrapped his arms around me and cried into my shoulder the way he used to when he was small and scared and the world felt too big. I held him. I stroked his hair. I whispered the same words I used to whisper when he had nightmares. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. Mama's got you." We stayed like that until his breathing slowed. Until the tears stopped. Until he was just tired. When he finally pulled back, his face was puffy and red, but his eyes looked clearer than they had in years. "I'm gonna do better," he said. "I promise." "I know you will," I said. He stood up slowly, helped me to my feet. "Get some rest, Mama. I'll pick you up in the morning. We'll have breakfast before your bus." "Okay," I said. He walked to the door, then stopped. Turned back. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Thank you," he said. "For not giving up on me." I smiled. "I never will." He left. The door clicked shut. And I stood there in that fancy hotel room, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far we'd come in just one night. My son had been lost. But now, he was finding his way home. And sometimes, that's all a mother can ask for. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because the bed wasn't comfortable, it was the softest bed I'd ever laid on. And not because I was upset. I wasn't. Not anymore. I stayed awake because I kept thinking about everything that had happened. About Julian's face when he saw me in the kitchen. About the shame in his eyes. About the way he'd cried in my arms like a child. But mostly, I thought about something he didn't know yet. Something I hadn't told him. I'd known for 3 months. Back in September, I went to the doctor because I'd been feeling tired. More tired than usual. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. They ran some tests. Called me back in. And then Dr. Patterson, a kind man who'd been my doctor for 20 years, sat me down and told me I had a heart condition. Not immediately life-threatening, he said. But serious. Something that needed monitoring. Something that meant I didn't have forever. Maybe 5 years. Maybe 10, if I was lucky and took care of myself. I didn't tell Julian. How could I? He hadn't called in months. And when he finally did call, it was just a quick, "Hey, Mama, I'm swamped, I'll call you back," and then nothing. So I kept it to myself. But it was part of why I took that 2-day bus ride. Why I brought the stew. Why I needed to see my son one more time, even if he didn't want to see me. Because I knew something he didn't. Time isn't unlimited. And neither is love, if you don't hold on to it. I looked out the hotel window at the glittering city and thought about all the years Julian and I had missed. All the phone calls that didn't happen. All the Sundays I'd set the table for 2 and eaten alone. But I also thought about tonight. About the way he'd held my hand in the car. About the way he'd said, "I'm coming home." Maybe I didn't have forever. But I had now. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. The next morning, Julian picked me up at 9. He looked different. Lighter somehow. He'd shaved. Changed into jeans and a clean shirt. He almost looked like my boy again. "Morning, Mama," he said, kissing my cheek. "Morning, baby." He took me to a small diner, not fancy, not French, just a regular place with red vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting too long. It was perfect. We ordered pancakes. He told me about his plans. How he'd talked to the owner last night, and she'd agreed to let him take a leave. How he'd already booked a flight to Alabama for next week. "I'll stay for 2 months," he said. "Maybe longer, if you'll have me." "I'll always have you," I said. He smiled. Then his expression shifted. Became more serious. "Mama, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Why now?" he asked. "Why did you come all this way? After 3 years of me barely calling, barely visiting. Why did you still show up?" I set down my coffee cup. Looked at him across the table. I thought about telling him the truth. About Dr. Patterson. About the tests. About the fact that I might not have as much time as either of us wanted. But I didn't. Because that wasn't why I came. Not really. "Because you're my son," I said simply. "And that doesn't change just because you're far away. It doesn't change just because you're busy. It doesn't change even when you forget to call." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I came because love doesn't keep score, baby. It just keeps showing up." Julian's eyes filled with tears again. He blinked them back, but I saw. "I don't know if I can ever make up for the time I wasted," he said. "Then don't waste any more," I said. "Just come home. That's all I need." He squeezed my hand. "I will. I promise." We finished breakfast. He paid the bill. And then he drove me to the bus station. As we stood on the platform, waiting for my bus to board, Julian hugged me tight. "I love you, Mama," he whispered. "I love you too, baby." So much. He pulled back and looked at me. Really looked at me. And for a second, I thought he saw it, the secret I was carrying. The reason I'd really come. But he didn't ask. And I didn't tell. Because some things, a mother carries alone. At least for a little while longer. The bus ride home felt different than the one to New York. I wasn't anxious anymore. I wasn't wondering if Julian would be happy to see me. I wasn't clutching my yellow lunchbox like a lifeline. I just sat by the window and watched the cities turn into towns, and the towns turn into fields, and thought about everything that had changed in just one night. My phone buzzed somewhere around Virginia. It was Julian. Made it back to the apartment. Already missing you. See you next week. Love you, Mama. I smiled and typed back with slow, careful fingers. Love you too, baby. Drive safe when you come home. He sent back a heart emoji. I stared at it for a long time. When was the last time my son had sent me a heart? I couldn't remember. When I finally got back to Alabama, it was late afternoon. My neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, had been watching my house. She came over as soon as she saw me pull up in the cab. Clara. You're back. How was New York? I climbed out slowly, my knees stiff from 2 days of sitting. It was good, Betty. Real good. Did you see Julian? I did. And? How is he? I thought about that question. About Julian's face in the kitchen. About the way he'd hidden me in a closet. About the way he'd cried in my arms. He's finding his way, I said. Betty smiled. Well, that's good. That's real good. She helped me carry my bag inside. The house smelled stale, like it always does when you've been gone a few days. I opened the windows to let in fresh air. My kitchen looked the same. Small. Old. The counters were chipped. The stove was the same one I'd had for 20 years. The table, the one Julian used to do his homework at, still wobbled on one leg. But it felt like home. I set my yellow lunchbox on the counter and opened it. It was empty now, of course. But I could still smell the faint scent of stew. I washed it carefully, dried it, and put it back in the cupboard where it belonged. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and let out a long, slow breath. I'd done it. I'd gone to New York. I'd seen my son. And somehow, against all odds, I'd brought him back. Not physically. Not yet. But I'd reminded him where he came from. And that was enough. The next week passed slowly. I cleaned the house. I washed the guest room sheets, the ones that hadn't been used in 3 years. I went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for all of Julian's favorite meals. Biscuits. Fried chicken. Collard greens. Peach cobbler. I even dug out my mama's old recipe box, the one with the faded index cards, stained with butter and flour and years of love. On Thursday, my phone rang. Mama? Hi, baby. I'm at the airport, Julian said. My flight boards in an hour. My heart leapt. You're really coming? I'm really coming. He paused. Mama, I'm nervous. Why? I don't know. What if I forgot everything? What if I can't cook the way you do? I smiled. Then we'll start from the beginning. That's what learning is, baby. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm glad I'm coming home. Me too, I said softly. Me too. Friday evening, I stood on my front porch and watched the sun set over the fields. The sky was pink and orange, and the cicadas were just starting their evening song. A car pulled up. A rental? Silver. Julian stepped out, wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. No chef's coat. No slicked back hair. Just my boy. He saw me standing there and smiled. I didn't run to him, my knees wouldn't let me. But I walked down the steps as fast as I could, and when he reached me, he picked me up in a hug so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "Hi, Mama," he whispered. "Welcome home, baby." He set me down gently, and I saw that his eyes were wet. "It's smaller than I remembered," he said, looking at the house. "Everything is when you've been gone too long," I said. He laughed. Then he grabbed his suitcase from the car and followed me inside. That night, we sat in the kitchen together. I pulled out my mama's recipe box and set it on the table between us. Julian stared at it like it was something sacred. "Tomorrow," I said, "we start with biscuits." He nodded. "From scratch? Is there any other way?" He smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in years. And for the first time since he'd left, I felt like my son was truly home. We woke up early the next morning. The kind of early where the sun is just starting to peek over the horizon and the world is still quiet. Julian came into the kitchen wearing an old Alabama t-shirt I didn't even know he still had. His hair was messy. He looked about 15 years old. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded. "Ready." I pulled out the flour, the buttermilk, the lard. The same ingredients my mama used. The same ingredients her mama used. "First rule," I said, tying my apron. "Cold hands. Warm heart. That's what my mama always said." Julian smiled. "I remember. We worked side by side. I showed him how to cut the lard into the flour, not too much, not too little. How to fold the dough gently, never overwork it. How to know when it's ready just by touch." He was slow at first. Uncertain. His hands had grown used to fancy techniques and precise measurements. But slowly, something shifted. He stopped thinking so hard. He stopped trying to be perfect. He just cooked. When we pulled the biscuits out of the oven, they were golden and flaky and smelled like heaven. Julian picked one up, broke it open, watched the steam rise. "I forgot," he whispered. "Forgot what?" "How good simple can be." We ate those biscuits with butter and honey, sitting at my old kitchen table, and it was the best breakfast I'd had in 3 years. The weeks that followed were some of the sweetest of my life. Every morning, Julian and I would cook together. I taught him everything again. How to make cornbread that's crispy on the edges. How to fry chicken so the coating stays on. How to season collard greens with just enough vinegar. But more than that, we talked. He told me about New York. About the pressure. About the nights he couldn't sleep because he was afraid of failing. About how he'd lost himself somewhere between his dreams and his reality. And I told him things too. About the years after he left. About how quiet the house had become. About Mrs. Dawson checking on me every day because she was worried I was lonely. "Were you?" he asked. "Lonely?" I thought about that. Sometimes, I admitted. But I was also proud. "You were chasing your dream, baby. That's what I always wanted for you. Even if it meant losing me." "I never lost you," I said. "You just took a detour." One afternoon, about 3 weeks into his visit, Julian was rolling out pie dough when he suddenly stopped. "Mama," he said. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "When I go back to New York. I want to change the menu." I looked up from the greens I was chopping. "Change it how?" "I want to add a section," he said. "Called Clara's Kitchen. Just a few dishes. Your stew. Your fried chicken. Your biscuits. Simple food. Real food." He looked at me. "Food that means something." My throat tightened. "Julian. I already talked to the owner," he continued. "She loved the idea. She said it would make us stand out. Not another French restaurant trying to be something they're not. But a place that honors both worlds. The technique I learned. And the heart you gave me." I set down my knife. "You really want to do that?" I really do, he said. But only if you're okay with it. It's your recipes. Your legacy. I walked over to him. Took his flour-covered hands in mine. Baby, I said, nothing would make me prouder. He smiled. And then he hugged me, getting flour all over both of us. On his last night, 8 weeks after he'd arrived, we made a feast. Everything he'd learned. Everything we'd cooked together. Fried chicken. Collard greens. Mac and cheese. Cornbread. And for dessert, peach cobbler. I invited Mrs. Dawson and a few neighbors over. We set up the table on the back porch, strung up some lights, and ate until we couldn't move. Everyone kept telling Julian how talented he was. How lucky New York was to have him. But Julian just smiled and said, I learned from the best. After everyone left, Julian and I sat on the porch swing together. The cicadas were singing. The stars were out. I don't want to leave, he said quietly. I know. But I have to. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll call you every Sunday. I promise. No matter how busy I am. Okay. And I'll come home for Christmas. And maybe Easter. And Julian, I said, stopping him. You don't have to make promises. Just don't forget. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget what matters. He looked at me, his eyes serious. I won't, Mama. I swear. I believed him. The next morning, I drove him to the airport. We didn't talk much in the car. We'd already said everything we needed to say. At the terminal, he hugged me one last time. I love you, Mama, he said. Thank you for not giving up on me. I love you too, baby, I said. Now go show them what Alabama cooking really means. He laughed, wiped his eyes, and walked toward security. I watched him until he disappeared into the crowd. And this time, when he left, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew he'd come back. Not just to visit. But to remember. And that made all the difference. 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Mama, turn on your computer, Julian said, his voice buzzing with excitement. What? Why? Just do it. Please. Go to the restaurant's website. I fumbled with my old laptop, the one Julian had bought me years ago that I barely knew how to use. After a few wrong clicks, I finally got to the website for Le Petit Pierre. And there it was. A whole new section on the menu. Clara's Kitchen, heritage dishes from Chef Julian's mother. Under it, listed in elegant script. Clara's Alabama beef stew with hickory salt. Buttermilk biscuits with honey butter. Sunday fried chicken with collard greens. Peach cobbler, grandmother's recipe. I stared at the screen, my eyes blurring with tears. Mama? You still there? I'm here, I whispered. It's been 3 weeks since we added them to the menu, Julian said. They're the most popular dishes we serve. People wait an hour just to try your stew. We can barely keep up. I couldn't speak. And Mama, he continued, his voice softer now. Mr. Sterling came back last week. He tried everything. He's writing a feature article about the restaurant. About how I went home to rediscover my roots. About how the best cooking comes from love, not technique. Julian. My voice broke. He wants to interview you, Julian said. If you're willing. He wants to come to Alabama and meet the woman behind the recipes. I wiped my eyes. Me. Yes, you. The real star of the kitchen. I laughed through my tears. I'm just a grandma from Alabama, baby. No, Julian said firmly. You're the chef who saved her son. You're the woman who taught me that food isn't about impressing people. It's about connecting them. And I want the world to know that. We talked for another hour. He told me about the restaurant. About the reviews. About how he'd hired a new sous chef so he could actually take Sundays off now. "I call you every Sunday, just like I promised," he said. "I know you do," I said. "I haven't missed a single one." Before we hung up, Julian said, "Mama?" "Yes, baby. Thank you. For everything. For raising me. For teaching me. For getting on that bus even when I didn't deserve it. For..." His voice cracked. "For loving me even when I forgot how to love you back." "That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We love you through the mess. We love you through the mistakes. We love you until you remember how to love yourself." "I remember now," he whispered. "Good," I said. "Don't forget again." After we hung up, I sat on my front porch with a cup of sweet tea and watched the sun set over the fields. The doctor's appointment from last week came to mind. Dr. Patterson had run more tests. The news wasn't great. My heart was weaker than before. "Maybe 2 years left," he said. "Maybe 3 if I was careful." But I wasn't scared. Because I'd done what I needed to do. I'd brought my son home. I'd reminded him of who he was. And now, even when I was gone, a piece of me would live on, not just in him, but in every person who tasted those recipes. My mama's recipes. My recipes. Our family's love, served on a plate. That felt like enough. More than enough. I closed my eyes and smiled. 6 months after that, Julian flew me to New York. First class this time. A car waiting at the airport. A beautiful hotel room overlooking Central Park. But the best part was walking into Le Petit Pierre, not through the back door, not hidden in a closet, but through the front entrance, on my son's arm. He introduced me to everyone. The staff. The regulars. Even Mr. Sterling, who kissed my hand and called me a culinary treasure. That night, Julian cooked for me. He made every dish from Clara's kitchen, plated beautifully, served with pride. And when the dinner service ended, he brought me into the kitchen, that same kitchen where he'd once hidden me, and he gathered all his staff around. "Everyone," he said, his arm around my shoulders. "This is my mama. Clara. Everything I know about cooking, about love, about patience, about what really matters, I learned from her. And I just want to say..." He looked at me, his eyes shining. "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." The kitchen erupted in applause. I stood there, in my simple dress and my old shoes, surrounded by professional chefs in their white coats, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not as someone to be hidden. Not as someone to be ashamed of. But as someone who mattered. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window and looked out at the glittering city. My phone buzzed. It was Julian. "Thank you for coming, Mama. I love you. Sleep well." I typed back slowly. "I love you too, baby. More than you'll ever know." I set the phone down and closed my eyes. And I realized something. I'd spent 3 years afraid that I'd lost my son to this city. To his ambition. To his pride. But in the end, love won. Not because it was loud. Not because it demanded attention. But because it showed up. Quietly. Persistently. Even when it hurt. And that's the thing about love, I think. It doesn't force people to change. It just keeps the door open until they're ready to walk back through. Julian walked through. And that made every mile, every tear, every moment in that dark closet worth it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to an old woman's story. I don't know what brought you here today. Maybe you're missing someone, maybe you're trying to fix something broken, maybe you just needed to hear that love doesn't give up. Whatever it is, I hope you found what you were looking for. And if there's someone in your life you've been meaning to call, someone you've been too proud or too scared to reach out to, maybe don't wait. Life's shorter than we think. And the people we love? They're worth the trip. Even if it's a long one. Take care of yourselves. and each other.